A small mystery waits in the folds of an old Greek tapestry, where the thread catches the light and seems, for a moment, to breathe. If this gentle kind of storytelling brings you a little peace, then, before we drift any deeper into the past, you might softly leave a like and subscribe, so we can meet again in future nights, and let history carry us onward, slowly, kindly, without haste. We will begin without thunder, without prophecy, without any sharp sound at all, just the ordinary world. The world a mortal knows best. A low room of sun-warmed stone, a doorway half covered by a linen curtain that moves when the breeze moves, the faint scent of olive oil and clean ash from a hearth that has burned down to quiet embers. Somewhere outside, a goat bell gives a small, patient note, and then falls silent again, as if even the animals have learned that silence is safer. In ancient Greece, the day starts gently, not with clocks, but with light. The first pale brightness touches the rim of the hills, slides down the slopes, and settles into courtyards and narrow lanes. It glints on clay jars. It finds the edge of a bronze bowl. It warms a patch of dust where bare feet will soon step, careful not to wake a sleeping child, careful not to disturb a household god that might be listening in the corner. A mortal life is made of small things. The weight of water carried from a spring, the roughness of rope in the hands, the smell of barley and crushed herbs, the sound of wool being teased apart, the soft rasp of fibers separating, becoming fluff, becoming thread. And in that world of small things, one skill stands out as both humble and dangerous, because it creates images, it makes stories, it turns the invisible into something you can point at. Weaving. There is a loom in a house, not far from a temple. The loom is tall, made of wood, smoothed by years of use. The warp threads hang straight as a curtain of pale lines, each one pulled taut, each one humming with the smallest vibration when a hand passes near. A basket sits beside the stool, full of wool, cleaned and combed, some still holding the faint scent of sheep and sun. There are little bowls of dye, too, dark purple pressed from shells, the sea's stubborn color, warm red from crushed roots, yellow from saffron or wild flowers dried in shade, brown from bark, black from soot and iron. These colors do not arrive by magic. They take time. They take patience. They take the kind of work that leaves the fingertips slightly stained, as if the hands have been holding sunsets. And there is a girl at this loom. Her name is Arachne. If you have heard her name before, it may come to you like a small shiver, not because the story is loud, but because it is so precise. Greek myths do not always punish the wicked. They often punish the noticeable, and Arachne, in her own quiet way, is impossible to ignore. She sits with her shoulders relaxed, her spine long but not stiff, as if she has learned the best way to endure a long day is to waste no strength on tension. The shuttle moves through the warp with a sound like a whispered breath. Back and forth, back and forth. The loom answers with soft taps and tiny knocks. Wood against wood, thread against thread. It is a rhythm that could lull you if you listened long enough. And perhaps that is why, in some households, Weaving is done near the end of the day, when the heat has softened, when the air has turned sweet with evening. People come to watch her work. They do not arrive like a crowd at a festival. They arrive one or two at a time, quietly. A neighbor, carrying figs in a cloth, pausing in the doorway. A young man sent by his mother to fetch a spool of thread, lingering longer than he needs to. An older woman who has woven all her life and still cannot stop herself from studying the pattern. The evenness, the way the colors shift like water. They watch because the cloth is not only cloth. It is a world built slowly, built deliberately, built with a patience that almost feels holy. Arachne's hands are steady. Her eyes do not strain. She looks, and she knows where the next thread belongs, as if the image has already settled inside her mind, and she is merely revealing it. Her tapestries show olive trees with leaves that seem to tremble. They show waves with foam. They show faces that hold emotion, not in a theatrical way, but in the soft way a real face holds it. The way grief lingers around the mouth, the way pride lifts the chin, the way fear makes the eyes too bright. And the villagers begin to say a sentence that is both praise and danger. They say she must have learned from Athena. Athena, the goddess of wisdom, of strategy, of craft. Athena who knows the geometry of war and the clean discipline of skill. Athena who is honored in temples that smell of incense and laurel, where offerings are laid with careful hands. Athena who does not like being compared to mortals. At first, Arachne laughs when she hears it. Not a cruel laugh, just the laugh of a young person who has not yet learned that some names should be spoken softly, with caution, in the dim coolness of the weaving room, with dust motes turning in the air like tiny drifting stars. She says something simple. She says, I did not learn from her. And then, perhaps because the watchers are waiting for more, perhaps because silence makes her restless, perhaps because youth can be both brave and careless, she adds another sentence. She says, I am better. It does not sound like a battle cry. It sounds like a fact. And in Greek myth, that is often worse, because the gods of Olympus are not distant. They are not locked behind the sky like a closed door. They are near. They are in the sharp edge of lightning. They are in the sudden crack of a branch in a quiet forest. They are in the sea wind that changes direction without warning. They are in the feeling of being watched when no human eyes are near. A mortal can live an entire life without being noticed. And that, in many ways, is the safest kind of luck. But when a god notices you, the story begins to tighten around you, like thread pulled too hard. Athena hears. Sometimes myths describe gods as if they are always listening, always aware, always waiting for a reason. And perhaps that is not literal, not in the way we would measure things now. Perhaps it is a way of saying that pride is a force, and pride can be summoned. Say a name too boldly, and you invite the weight of that name into your life. Athena arrives not as a storm, but as a presence. She comes down like cool air moving into a warm room. She comes as a woman, veiled, with the posture of someone accustomed to being obeyed. Her feet touch the ground without dust rising. Her gaze is steady, sharp in a way that does not feel like anger at first, but like assessment. Arachne looks up, and something in her chest tightens. the way the body reacts before the mind has found words. The goddess speaks softly. There is no need to raise a voice when the world has learned to lean in. She tells Arachne that skill is a gift. She tells her that gifts are not owned by mortals. She tells her that humility is the proper garment for a human being. And then, with a calm that is more chilling than rage, she offers a contest. 2 looms, 2 tapestries, 1 judgment. In another kind of story, this might feel like an honor. In Greek myth, it feels like a trap made of silk. Still, Arachne agrees. The looms are set facing each other. The room fills with quiet watchers. The air holds the smell of wool and dye and human breath. Outside, the day continues. Indifferent, but inside the room, time narrows to thread. Athena begins first. Her tapestry is perfect. Of course it is. The lines are exact. The figures are composed with authority. She weaves scenes of order, of cities protected by wisdom, of humans punished for arrogance. She shows what mortals are meant to learn, obey, honor, submit. Her colors are disciplined, not wild. Her image is stern and bright, like polished bronze. It is the work of a mind that believes the world should be arranged. And then Arachne begins. Her hands move faster than the eye expects. Not frantic, not messy, just assured. Her weaving does not preach. It reveals. Her tapestry fills with the other side of the divine story. The side spoken of in whispers. The side that mortals try not to think about too loudly at night. She weaves Zeus, king of the gods, not as a wise ruler, but as a hungry force. Wearing disguises the way a man might wear cloaks. She shows him as a bull, as a swan, as a shower of gold, not romantic, not noble, but insistent, unstoppable. She shows mortal women caught in divine attention, like leaves caught in a current. She weaves Poseidon too, Sea Lord, tittle and violent. She shows him in the temple of Athena, where the stone floor is sacred, where the air smells of offerings, and where a mortal named Medusa, in some tellings a priestess, is harmed. The tapestry does not shout. It does not add flames or exaggerated horror. It simply places the scene there, in thread, in color, in the calm cruelty of truth. She weaves Apollo, bright god of music, chasing those who do not wish to be chased. She weaves Hera's punishments, falling on the wrong heads, like hail falling on a field that did nothing but grow. She weaves the gods not as moral examples, but as powerful beings who do what they please, and mortals as the ones who pay the price. The watchers feel something as they look, a mix of awe and discomfort. The way a person feels when a quiet sentence lands too accurately. Some glance toward the doorway, as if expecting a divine wind to enter. Some hold their breath. Arachne's work is not only beautiful, it is honest, and that is what makes it unbearable. Athena finishes her tapestry and turns to see Arachne's. For a moment, the room is still enough that you could hear the smallest sound, a thread sliding, a breath caught, a distant bird outside. Athena does not tear it apart because it is badly made. She tears it apart because it is well made. She tears it because the truth, when it is spoken by a mortal, is not called truth in Greek myth. It is called insolence. It is called overstepping. It is called hubris. That invisible line crossed, the line that gods draw around themselves. The goddess strikes Arachne down, not to kill her, not yet. Punishment in these stories is often more poetic than that, more lingering. Arachne, in shock and despair, reaches for the rope, for the quick escape of death, because mortals know the only door they truly control is the one they leave through. But Athena does not allow even that clean ending. Athena catches her, holds her between life and death, and then transforms her. The body becomes smaller, the limbs thin and multiply. Fingers that once moved through wool become legs that cling to corners. A voice that once laughed becomes silence. Arachne becomes a spider. And the myth makes its point with cruel elegance. She will weave forever. She will make art forever. But she will do it without pride, without praise, without the warm human room, without the right to speak of what she knows. If you imagine her now, you might see a corner of a stone wall in soft evening light, and a web drawn there, each strand placed with careful instinct. Dew collects on it in tiny beads. In the morning, the beads catch the sun like small pearls. It is beautiful, and it is also a cage. This is how Greek myth teaches mortals a lesson: do not be noticed. Because in that world, the safest blessing is obscurity. The safest prayer is the one that does not demand too much. The safest talent is the one that does not shine brightly enough to irritate a god's fragile pride. And so, as we sit with this story, we can let the room quiet again. We can feel the day soften. We can hear, in our minds, the gentle tap of the loom that is now gone. We can sense the way the ancient world carried its fears not in loud speeches, but in everyday caution. A mortal learns to speak carefully. A mortal learns to thank quickly. A mortal learns to step lightly near shrines, to pour a little wine on the ground, to leave a crumb of bread for an unseen guest, not because love is demanded by the gods, but because survival is. And somewhere above, or beside, or just beyond the edge of sight, the Olympians watch as they always do, sometimes amused, sometimes bored, sometimes suddenly interested. In Greek myth, that interest is rarely gentle. So let us move forward from Arachne's loom, not hurriedly, but slowly, as if we are walking along a stone path at dusk, the air cooling, the scent of olives and wild thyme drifting low. The next stories, the next small tragedies, will come like distant waves, one after another, for the mortals beneath Olympus. Life is like that. A quiet day, a careful word, and then a god's shadow passing over the sun. The world after Arachne feels the same on the surface, and that is part of the unease. The same sun rises, the same markets open, the same bread bakes in clay ovens, filling narrow streets with a warm scent that makes even hardship feel briefly bearable. Children still run past columns and laugh. Fishermen still mend their nets. Women still draw water and talk softly at the well. And yet, in the back of the mind, there is a knowledge that settles like fine dust. The gods are close. In the Greek imagination, the divine is not a distant moral principle. It is weather. It is appetite. It is pride. It is a sudden change in fortune. It is the way a life can be altered, not because you chose poorly, but because a god chose to look your way. So we move from the loom to another ordinary scene, as gentle as it begins, and as dangerous as it becomes. A young woman sits in a courtyard at noon, when the heat presses down and even the lizards pause in the shade. Her name is Semele. She is mortal, which in Greek myth is another way of saying fragile. She is the daughter of a king, which means she has silk and servants and fine jewelry, but none of that matters when a god decides to visit. Zeus comes to her, not necessarily with cruelty in mind. That is what makes these stories so quietly unsettling. He comes with desire, with charm, with the easy confidence of someone who has never been told no in any meaningful way. He whispers promises. And in the myth, the mortal heart responds, as mortal hearts do, with warmth and wonder and the wish to be chosen. Semele becomes pregnant, and the child inside her carries divinity like a spark hidden in dry grass. But Olympus is not a place of quiet acceptance. Hera, the wife of Zeus, hears of this, and her anger does not rise toward the man who has done the betraying. It turns, as it so often does in these old stories, toward the woman who is easiest to break. Hera does not arrive like a warrior. She arrives like a thought. She comes in disguise, as an older woman, with a voice that sounds like concern. She sits with Semele in the hot afternoon, the air heavy, the cicadas droning like a steady spell. She plants a seed of doubt that grows quickly, because doubt in a mortal mind is fertile. Are you sure he is who he says he is, if he is truly Zeus? Why does he hide himself? If he loves you, why would he deny you the truth? Semele listens, not because she is foolish, but because she is human. A mortal cannot live on promises alone. A mortal wants certainty. A mortal wants to see, to touch, to know. And so, when Zeus returns, she asks him for proof. She asks him to show himself as he truly is. In another story, truth might be a gift. Here, it is a kind of fire. Zeus hesitates. He warns her. He knows, in some distant part of himself, that mortal flesh is not built to hold the full weight of a god's presence, but he is bound by an oath. And Greek myth loves oaths like it loves knots once tied. They tighten. He reveals his true form. Light fills the courtyard. Not the warm light of afternoon, but a brightness so intense it becomes a soundless roar. The air becomes sharp. The stones seem to glow. Semele's body, which has known only human heat and human breath, cannot bear it. She is consumed, burned away in a moment that is both swift and endless. It is not a punishment that feels personal. It is a punishment that feels structural. Like gravity, like a law of the universe, mortals are not meant to stand too close to gods. And yet, even in this tragedy, the myth continues, because the unborn child is not entirely mortal. Zeus, in a gesture that is both tender and strange, saves the fetus and sews it into his own thigh. Carrying it there, until it is ready to be born. The child is Dionysus, god of wine and ecstasy, a figure who will blur boundaries and unmake neat categories. He is born from loss, from heat, from a mortal woman who wanted truth and paid for it with her life. If you sit with this story for a moment, you can feel how it would haunt ordinary people. Imagine being a young woman hearing it at a festival, the smell of wine in the air, the sound of drums far away, and realizing that even love from a god can be lethal, not because the god hates you, simply because the distance between mortal and divine is too great. And Samela is not alone. There's another girl in another place, and her name is Io. Io is a priestess, or a maiden, depending on the version. She moves through a temple space that smells of smoke and warm stone. Where the floor is cool beneath the feet, she does her duties. Lights, lamps, whispers prayers. She is not seeking adventure. She is not calling attention. But Zeus sees her. Divine attention in these stories is like a hand reaching down into a quiet pond and stirring it. The surface that was calm becomes ripples, then waves. Everything changes. To hide Io from Hera, Zeus transforms her into a cow. Not a monstrous beast, not a demon, just a cow, white. In some tellings, with a softness in the eyes that makes the transformation feel even crueler. Imagine it, not as comedy, but as disorientation, to wake and find your hands gone, your words gone, your upright posture gone, to feel your mouth shaped for grass, your thoughts still human but trapped behind an animal's silence. Hera is not fooled. She asks for the cow as a gift, because in myth, even a goddess can smile while she sharpens a knife. She places Io under guard, and the guard is Argus, a giant with 100 eyes. It is hard to convey the feeling of that image without raising the voice. So let it come softly, a creature whose whole being is vigilance, eyes open even when others close, eyes that turn in different directions like watchful stars. Io is watched always. She cannot even rest in private. She cannot cry in a way anyone understands. She cannot say her own name. And then Hera adds another layer of torment, as if a single misery is never enough. She sends a gadfly, a small insect with a sharp bite, to chase Io constantly. Imagine the sound of it, a thin buzzing at the edge of hearing, the sudden sting, the flinch, the helpless run, the hooves striking hard ground, the breath coming fast, day after day, the body exhausted, the mind frightened and angry and unable to explain itself. Io runs across landscapes that expand like a slow dream. She crosses rivers and plains. She wanders through foreign lands where people point and wonder why a cow's eyes look too aware. She becomes a moving emblem of what it means to be touched by Olympus, a living warning, even if you survive. You will be changed. Eventually, yes, she is restored to human form. The myth allows that small mercy, but it is not a clean return. Io does not simply step back into her old life. How could she? The memory of being watched by 100 eyes stays in the mind like a shadow. The feeling of being chased by something tiny and relentless, something you cannot reason with, stays in the body. And perhaps that is the deeper point. The gods do not always kill mortals. Sometimes they leave them alive, with a story carved into their nerves. From Io, we drift to another kind of cruelty. Quieter and colder. Cassandra. She is a princess of Troy. The city around her is rich with stone walls and busy streets. The smell of baked bread and hot metal and sea wind fills the air. Priests chant. Merchants argue. Children play in courtyards. Everything looks sturdy, as if it will last. Apollo gives Cassandra a gift. Prophecy. To see the future. To hear the shape of what is coming. As clearly as one hears thunder in the distance. It sounds like power. It sounds like protection. And yet, in Greek myth, gifts from gods often carry a hidden hook. Apollo desires Cassandra. She does not return his desire. She refuses him, or withdraws, or changes her mind, as mortals do, because mortals are allowed to be uncertain. Apollo does not accept that, so he twists the gift into a curse. Cassandra will speak the truth, always, and no one will believe her. Imagine it, not as dramatic screaming, but as the slow loneliness of certainty. She stands in a corridor of a palace at dusk, the light turning honey-colored on the walls, and she knows what will happen. She knows that ships will come. She knows that fire will climb the beams. She knows that grief will roll through the streets like smoke. And when she speaks, she is met with smiles that are tired, with dismissive hands, with people who want comfort instead of truth. Even those who love her cannot follow her into the future she sees, because the curse makes her words slide away from the mind, as if the truth is coated in oil. This is not a punishment of the body. It is a punishment of meaning. To be right and unheard. To watch disaster approach while everyone continues sweeping the courtyard, preparing food, planning weddings, as if the world is stable. Greek myths understand that this can be worse than death, because it isolates the soul. And then there is Niobe, another mortal whose suffering becomes part of the landscape. Niobe has children, many children, and the house is loud with their footsteps. There is laughter. There are squabbles. There are small hands reaching for bread. There are voices calling for a mother. The air in the rooms is warm with life. And Niobe, in a moment of pride, boasts. She says she is greater than Leto, mother of only 2 children. Leto's 2 children are Apollo and Artemis. They strike Niobe's children down, one by one, with arrows that do not miss. The myth does not linger on gore. It lingers on the emptiness afterward, the quiet rooms, the silence where a child's voice should be, the mother's breath catching in a throat that no longer knows what to say. Niobe is turned to stone, and in some tellings, she still weeps, her tears becoming a spring. Water, forever, moving down a face that cannot change. If you picture that stone on a mountain, you can see why such stories were told. The Greeks looked at rocks, at strange formations, at water seeping from stone, and they made meaning. They made a warning. They said, "Here is pride made permanent." And all of this, all these tales, circle around a single lesson, spoken softly but repeatedly. Do not rise too high. Do not speak too boldly. Do not invite a god's attention. Even those who ask for proof, even those who tell the truth, even those who simply exist beautifully, can be pulled into divine games. And then, as if to show how quickly a mortal can turn a bright wish into catastrophe, the myths give us another image, one that feels almost like a dream about losing control. Phaethon, a young man who wants to know his father. He wants certainty again. The same hunger Semele had. He asks Helios, the sun god, for proof. And Helios, bound by love or pride, swears he will grant any request. Phaethon asks to drive the chariot of the sun for a day. Imagine that chariot not as a cartoon, but as a blazing weight, horses made of fire and breath, a sky that is not empty, but full of forces. The path the sun takes is not a road you can see. It is a pattern held by divine steadiness. Phaethon takes the reins. The heat is immediate. The light is too bright. The horses feel the difference between divine hands and mortal hands. They surge. They veer. The sun swings too close to the earth. Fields scorch. Rivers steam. Forests crackle. The world itself, so calm from the ground, begins to unravel above, and Zeus ends it with a lightning bolt. Quick, final, a star falling. Mortals below look up and see a bright streak and do not know, at first, what it means. Later, the Puts will name it. Later, people will turn it into a lesson. Some burdens are not meant for human shoulders. When you gather these stories together, you can feel what it meant to live beneath them. Imagine being an ordinary farmer, listening to an old man tell these tales by a small fire. The night air is cool. The smell of smoke clings to hair and wool. Somewhere in the dark, an owl calls once, then stops. You do not hear these myths and feel safe. You hear them and learn caution. You learn to pour a small offering before you drink wine, just in case Dionysus is listening. You learn to speak well of Artemis near the edge of the forest, just in case she walks there unseen. You learn not to boast, not to compare yourself to the gods, not to demand proof, not to ask for too much. And perhaps, over time, this caution becomes a kind of gentle ritual in the body, a softness in the voice, a carefulness in the steps, a habit of gratitude even when gratitude feels undeserved. Because, in Greek myth, the gods do not always punish the wicked. They punish the visible. So as this part comes to rest, let the images settle like slow sand in clear water. A loom, a bright courtyard, a white cow running under a relentless sky, a princess whispering truths into ears that cannot hold them, a stone mother weeping on a mountain, a sun chariot tilting too near the earth. All of it, quiet in the telling, heavy in the meaning. And from here, we will continue, unhurried, into the next rooms of the mythic world, where mortals keep living anyway, keep baking bread, keep drawing water, keep loving, keep hoping, even while the gods watch from above, as distant as clouds, and as close as breath. There are stories that begin with a sword, and there are stories that begin with a quiet lamp burning in a temple. Medusa's story, in its oldest and most lingering versions, begins not with a monster, but with a room of cool stone, where the air smells faintly of oil and salt, and where footsteps soften as they cross a floor that has been washed again and again by careful hands. In that room, Medusa is not yet a warning carved into fear. She is simply a young woman, breathing the same sea air as everyone else, listening to the same distant gulls, living within rules that feel as fixed as marble. She is said to be beautiful, yes, but the myth's beauty is not a modern glamour, not a bright performance. It is a quiet kind of beauty, like moonlight on water, like wheat in a field when the wind passes over it. It is the beauty of a face that looks calm even when the mind is busy, the beauty of hair that catches the light and makes people look twice. And in the Greek world, to be looked at twice can be as dangerous as being touched. Medusa serves in Athena's temple, or at least lives in the orbit of sacred space, where a mortal life is meant to be tidy, obedient, and small. Yet the gods, as you already know, do not always respect the borders they demand. Poseidon, ruler of the sea, arrives like a tide that does not ask permission. The temple that should have been a refuge becomes a stage for divine impulse. Different tellings shift the details, soften them, sharpen them, move blame like a shadow, but the shape of the harm remains. And the aftermath is what myth loves to keep. Athena, goddess of discipline and order, does not turn her anger on Poseidon, whose power is equal to her own in the vast, complicated hierarchy of the divine. Instead, she turns it on the mortal who cannot fight back in any meaningful way. Medusa is transformed. Her hair, once praised, becomes snakes, not writhing in frantic motion, but alive in a slow, constant way, like a field of reeds that never stops moving. Her gaze becomes an ending. To meet her eyes is to become stone, not always in a dramatic instant, but in the mythic imagination, it is sudden and final, the way a heartbeat can stop, the way a sentence can be cut off mid-word. She is sent far away, to a place that is not a home, not a temple, not a city, a place at the edge of maps, where the air is damp and heavy, where the ground is uneven and quiet, where the wind seems to pause before it enters, as if the wind itself does not want to be seen. And there, Medusa lives with her sisters, the Gorgons. Two are immortal. One is not. That one is Medusa. And even that detail, the fact of her mortality among immortals, feels like the myth tightening its thread. It is not enough that she is punished. She must also be made into a target. If you imagine the Gorgons' country, do not imagine it as a loud nightmare. Imagine it as a strange silence, a shoreline where the sea comes in without music, as if the waves have forgotten how to sing, a sky that can look low and pale, with clouds stretched thin like wool pulled too far, rocks that are slick with salt, and pools that hold still water, dark as if they are made from ink. The caves there are wide-mouthed, hollowed by time, and the air inside carries the smell of minerals and old dampness. The sound is different too. In a city, sound bounces and returns. In a cave, it is swallowed. A footstep becomes a soft thud that dies quickly. A breath feels louder than it should. And then there are the statues. Not statues made by hands. Not polished offerings to the gods. But the bodies of men and animals turned into stone where they stood. A warrior with his arm raised, frozen in the beginning of a strike. A sailor who still holds the curve of fear in his shoulders. A wolf mid-step, ears alert, eternally listening. Some are half covered by sand or lichen. Some have bird droppings on their shoulders. Ordinary indignity, settling on extraordinary endings. When the sun strikes them, they can look almost alive for a moment, as if the stone remembers flesh. The effect is not meant to excite you. It is meant to quiet you, because it suggests a world where even courage becomes decoration. Medusa herself is not always shown as raging. In some tellings, she is simply there, existing in the way an injured thing exists when it has been cornered for too long. She has become what she did not choose, and the loneliness of that becomes part of her shape. The snakes in her hair do not need to hiss constantly for the scene to feel uneasy. Their presence is enough. A soft, perpetual movement. Her skin is said to be pale in the dimness, her face still holding traces of the human it once was, which makes the horror more intimate. And her eyes, the myth says, are the center of it all. Not glowing like fire, not theatrical, but clear, steady, and final. The most frightening gaze is not the one that screams. It is the one that does not flinch. While Medusa is pushed to the margins of the world, in a far different place, another life is being shaped by fear. And this life will be the thread that eventually ties back to her cave. Perseus is born in Argos, where the air is bright and dry, where stone houses warm under the sun, where olive trees make thin shadows on the ground. His mother is Danae, a princess, and her story begins with prophecy. Because Greek tales love to place a future in a man's ear and watch him twist himself trying to escape it. Danae's father, King Acrisius, is told he will die by the hand of his grandson, so he locks Danae away. Not because stone can stop fate, but because men often believe that walls are stronger than words. She is placed in a chamber of bronze or stone, sealed against ordinary visitors, a room where the light is narrow and the air can feel still, where days pass by the slow movement of brightness across a floor. Yet Zeus arrives anyway, not as a man at a door, but as something that cannot be barred, a shower of gold. The myth says, slipping through cracks, falling like warm light, like glittering rain that does not wet the skin, but somehow changes everything. Danae becomes pregnant. Perseus is born, a small human body with a divine father he will never truly know. A child who cries and breathes and reaches for warmth like any other infant. Acrisius, frightened by what cannot be undone, does what frightened kings often do in these stories. He tries to throw the problem into the sea. Danae and her baby are set into a wooden chest and pushed onto the water. Imagine that moment slowly. The creak of wood, the smell of pitch and salt, the bright horizon that looks calm, indifferent, the chest rocking, not violently at first, but with the gentle insistence of waves. Danae holding Perseus close, feeling his small breath against her, listening to the sea as if the sea might answer. The nights on the water are cold, The days are blinding. The chest drifts as if fate itself is doing the rowing. And finally it reaches an island, Serifos, where fishermen pull it ashore, startled by the weight of it, by the sound of a baby inside. Danae and Perseus survive. The boy grows. He becomes strong in the way island boys become strong. By walking on stone paths, by hauling nets, by living with wind and salt. He learns the smell of fish and rope and sun-dried wood. He learns patience. He learns how to watch the sea for changes, how to sense a storm before it arrives. And yet, even in this ordinary growing, the myth is quietly arranging its next movement. Because on Seriphos there is a king, Polydect, whose desire fixes itself on Danae. He wants her, and she does not want him. And Perseus stands between them like a door that will not open. So Polydectes looks for a way around the door. He invents a feast. He demands gifts. He pretends it is tradition, that men must prove loyalty by offering horses or gold. Perseus, young and proud, and still learning what power looks like when it smiles, boasts that he will bring a gift no one else can bring. He says he will bring the head of Medusa, a sentence spoken too quickly. Perhaps in a room with too many listening ears, and the myth hears it, and the road begins to unroll. Somewhere far away, in that silent cave near the edge of the world, Medusa continues to exist. Somewhere closer, a young man has promised to end her, and the night air around all of it feels very still, as if the world is holding its breath. A promise, once spoken, becomes a weight, even if the speaker was young when he made it. Perseus wakes the next morning on Seriphos, and the island looks the same as it always does, which is the most unsettling part. The sea still shines in thin morning light. The nets still hang to dry, stiff with salt. A dog sleeps in a patch of sun without worrying about kings or monsters. Yet Perseus feels the sentence he said at the feast sitting inside him like a stone. Medusa's head. The words sound impossible when the mouth is closed and the mind is alone. And still, in Greek myth, impossibility is not a barrier. It is an invitation. Polydectes does not need to shout at Perseus. Power rarely needs to shout. It simply waits and watches, letting the young man's pride tighten into a noose. Danae moves quietly through the house, and Perseus sees the tired restraint in her face, the careful way she avoids the king's gaze, the way she tries to keep her son from noticing what she cannot fully hide. The island air is warm and damp, scented with seaweed and sun-heated stone. But inside Perseus there is a dry heat, the heat of determination mixed with fear. He decides to go, not because he knows how to kill a Gorgon, but because he cannot bear the alternative. The slow humiliation of staying while his mother is pressured, while his name is turned into something small. He gathers what he can. A simple cloak, a knife, more useful for cutting rope than for fighting monsters. A few pieces of bread wrapped in cloth, water in a clay flask. And as he steps away from the familiar shore, the myth begins to open the door between mortal effort and divine interference. Because some tasks in these stories are designed so a human cannot complete them alone. Athena, who punished Medusa, does not forget Medusa. Hermes, the messenger, does not forget the movement of a story. In myth, the gods behave as if they are arranging a lesson for each other as much as for mortals, like players shifting pieces on a board that spans the whole world. Perseus is noticed, perhaps because he is Zeus's son, perhaps because the promise has stirred the old thread of fate, perhaps because heroes are simply the mortals who become visible. Athena approaches him first, or Hermes does, depending on the telling. But the feeling is similar. The air changes. A wind that was steady becomes still, then returns from a different direction. The light on the water seems to sharpen. Perseus senses, before he understands, that he is not alone in the wide world. He hears a voice that is calm, almost practical, not soothing exactly, but precise. He is told that a Gorgon cannot be faced with ordinary eyes, and that a hero's first weapon is not strength, but method. Athena offers a polished shield, not merely as defense, but as a mirror, so Perseus can look without looking, can see without meeting the deadly gaze. Hermes offers guidance and, in some tellings, a curved sword, a blade made for a swift, clean cut. But even with these gifts, the path is not straight. The myth does not allow a simple walk from island to monster. It sends Perseus to find information first, because knowledge in Greek stories is never free. He must find the Graea, the Grey Sisters, old beings who share one eye and one tooth among them. Imagine them in a place where the sun does not reach well, where the wind makes a thin sound through rocks. Their skin is parchment-like, their hair like smoke, their bodies bent as if time itself has pressed on their shoulders. They do not hurry. They have existed too long to hurry. They pass the single eye between them with slow, practiced hands. When one sister sees, the others are blind. When the eye moves, the world goes dark again. Perseus watches. He waits. He feels the patience of the scene, the unnatural calm of it, as if the world is holding its breath around these ancient women. And when the eye is between hands, he takes it, not violently, not with pleasure, simply with the swift necessity of someone who has realized that the story will not soften for him. The sisters hiss and bargain and threaten. Their voices sound like dry leaves scraping stone. Perseus stands firm, holding the eye, feeling its strange smoothness in his palm, feeling the way 3 ancient lives tilt toward him in hunger for sight. He tells them he will return it only if they guide him. And so they do, grudgingly, because even the old ones must yield sometimes. When the logic of myth tightens, they tell him where the nymphs are, the ones who keep certain hidden tools. They tell him how to reach the edge places where the world feels thin. From there, Perseus travels through landscapes that stretch like a long breath. There are hills covered with thyme and low shrubs that release scent when brushed by a passing cloak. There are narrow paths where stones shift underfoot with a soft scrape. There are nights under a sky so clear the stars look close enough to touch, and the air is cool on the skin, and the sound of insects rises and falls in a steady pattern like a lullaby. Perseus sleeps lightly, because heroes often sleep lightly, not because they are restless by nature, but because the world has become too wide and too uncertain to surrender completely. At times he thinks of Danae, of her hands, of the way she used to steady him as a child. At times he thinks of Medusa, though he has never seen her. And his thoughts are not triumphant. They are wary. He begins to understand that he is walking towards someone who was once human, someone who was harmed and then made into a hazard for others. The thought settles in him like a quiet question he does not have the language to ask. Still, he keeps going, because the myth is already moving. He reaches the place of the nymphs, and it is softer than he expects. Not a palace, not a temple, but a green hidden fold of the world where water moves gently over stones, where the air is cool and smells of wet leaves, where light filters through branches and falls in slow shifting patches. The nymphs do not feel like judges. They feel like the living part of nature that does not care about kings. They give Perseus what he needs, not with ceremony, but with calm inevitability, winged sandals that will lift him above difficult ground, a special bag to carry what must not be seen, and in some tellings, a helm of invisibility, a darkness you can wear. Perseus receives these things with a new kind of seriousness. He is still young, but the road has changed him. Each gift is a reminder that his task is not a sport. It is a passage into a place where one wrong glance ends everything. And now, at last, the myth begins to draw the Gorgons closer. Perseus rises into the air with the winged sandals, and the sensation is not joyous like a child running downhill. It is strange, steady, almost solemn. The wind presses against his face, carrying salt and cold. The sea below becomes a broad moving sheet, darker in some places, lighter in others, like silk being slowly shaken out. He sees distant coastlines, pale edges of land, the kind that look simple from above, but are full of rocks and hidden coves when you are on foot. He travels until the air itself feels heavier, as if the world is turning towards stone. The light dulls slightly. The clouds gather in a low, flat layer. The wind changes its voice, becoming quieter, thinner, and then, far ahead, he sees the shape of a place that does not welcome visitors. Not a dramatic castle, not a mountain with fire, but a rough coast, jagged and worn, where waves break without sparkle. He lowers himself slowly, careful, using the gifts like tools rather than toys. He touches down where the ground is damp and cold, and he feels the stillness of it. Even the birds seem distant. He pulls the helm over his head, or he prepares the shield, depending on the version you carry in your mind. But the meaning is the same. He cannot enter this place as an ordinary man. He must enter like a shadow. He must look sideways. He must move as if the air itself can betray him. Somewhere inside the caves, Medusa sleeps, or rests, or simply exists in a half state between waking and waiting. Her sisters are there too, immortal and watchful. The statues stand as proof. Perseus feels his heart beating, not loudly, but steadily, like a drum far away. He raises the shield so he can see the world in its curved reflection. The reflected cave mouth looks like a dark eye. He steps forward. One step, another. The sound of his foot is swallowed. The air smells of salt, stone, and something older, like damp earth that has not seen sunlight in a long time. And as he crosses the threshold, the story narrows to a single gentle, dangerous instruction: do not look directly. Not once, not even for a heartbeat. Only the reflection, only the mirrored world, only the slow, careful approach. Part of him wants to rush, to finish the fear quickly. But the gifts from the gods have taught him the opposite. This is a task for patience, a task for softness, a task for steady hands. And so he goes on, deeper, into the quiet. The mouth of the cave holds a different air than the shore. It is cooler, steadier, and it carries a patient smell, like stone that has been wet and dried 1,000 times. Perseus slows his pace as if he is learning a new language with his body. He does not lift his head too quickly. He does not turn his face towards sudden sounds. He keeps the polished surface of Athena's shield angled in front of him, so that the world comes to him in a curved reflection, softened and slightly distant, as if it is happening inside a bowl of dark water. The cave is not one room. It is a long throat of rock that narrows and widens, that makes its own small weather. Drops of water gather on the ceiling and fall now and then, and each drop lands with a tiny click that feels strangely loud, because here even small sounds seem to be noticed. His sandals find patches of grit, then patches of smooth stone that can be slick as oil. Sometimes the wall brushes close to his shoulder. Sometimes the ceiling comes down low enough that he must bend his neck and move as if he is bowing to the earth. He had imagined, in the bright simplicity of daylight, that fear would arrive like thunder. But inside the cave it comes in quieter ways. It comes as a tightening of the throat when he hears his own breath. It comes as the awareness that there is no wind here to scatter scent or sound, no wide sky to dilute danger. It comes as the thought that this is a place made for waiting, and that waiting itself can be a kind of hunting. He holds the shield with care, because it is not only a tool, it is a promise. Athena did not give him comfort. She gave him a method. Look, but do not look. See, but do not meet the eyes. Trust the reflection more than the instinct, because instinct will pull you toward the wrong kind of certainty. In the shield's surface, the cave looks slightly bent, slightly unreal, and that is strangely soothing. It makes the danger feel like a story being told, rather than a thing that can reach out and touch him. Yet his hands know the difference. They know the weight of the blade Hermes gave him. They know the lightness of the winged sandals against his ankles. They know the strange invisible pressure of the helm that can hide him, even when his heart feels too loud to hide. As he moves deeper, the reflection begins to reveal shapes that do not belong to stone, or rather, shapes that belong to stone now, but once belonged to breath. A man frozen mid-step, his mouth slightly open as if he was about to call out. A woman with her hands lifted toward her face, fingers spread, as if she tried to block her eyes too late. A goat caught in a startled leap. The rock has taken every detail, every fold of cloth, every vein in a hand, every tense line of muscle. It is so precise that it feels unkind, as if the cave itself wished to preserve the moment of panic forever. Perseus does not linger, but he cannot help seeing. These statues are not only warnings, they are proof that the stories are true. And proof, in this place, is not reassuring. Proof is heavy. Proof means the rules are real. He moves slowly, counting his steps in his mind. He listens for anything that is not his own movement. At first he hears only water, and the soft whisper of sand shifting under his sandals. Then, gradually, there is another sound, a faint sliding, a delicate friction, like dry reeds rubbing together when a breeze passes through them. The sound is constant, but gentle. It is the sound of small bodies moving in a slow, continuous way. The snakes. He keeps his face turned slightly away, not because he can see them directly, but because he does not want even the temptation of a sudden glance. The shield is his world now. The shield is his window, and also his distance. In the reflection, farther ahead, the passage opens into a deeper chamber. The darkness there looks thicker, as if it has been stored and guarded. Perseus pauses at the edge of that opening and lets his breathing settle. He does not tell himself to be brave. He tells himself to be careful. Bravery, he is learning, is often just haste with a proud name. Care is quieter, and it lasts longer. He thinks, for a moment, of his mother, Danae, and the way she tried to keep her voice calm on Seriphos. He remembers the soft rustle of her dress in the evening, and the way she would look at the doorway as if she expected trouble to step in at any moment. He remembers Polydectes, too, and his smile that looked courteous from a distance and sharp when you stood close. Perseus had spoken his promise too quickly, as if words were light. But words can be chains, and now he is walking with that chain wrapped around his wrist. He lowers himself onto one knee, then both, because the floor is uneven and he wants to be steady. The air in the chamber is cooler still, and it has a faint metallic taste that might be minerals, might be blood, might be nothing but imagination. He adjusts the shield in small, precise movements, and then, in the curved surface, he sees her. Medusa is not standing to strike. She is resting. She is folded into herself like a creature that has carried too much weight for too long. One arm lies across her middle. Her head is turned slightly. Cheek near the stone, the snakes that crown her head move with a slow, continuous life. Not frenzied, not dramatic, but present, always present. Their small movements catch what little light there is, making faint glints that appear and vanish. Even through the reflection, she looks oddly human in the lines of her body. The danger is in her face, but the tiredness is in her posture. There is something unsettling about that, and also something sad. Perseus had grown up with the story of Medusa as a warning, as a monster placed in the world to be defeated. But here, in the quiet of the cave, she does not look like a lesson. She looks like a consequence. He holds his breath, then releases it slowly. He reminds himself that pity can be a trap, and that hesitation can be the same. He is not here to judge the fairness of the gods. He is here because the gods have already judged, and their judgment is the world he lives in. Still, his mind wanders, the way a mind will wander when it wants to soften a sharp moment. He remembers the whispers he heard about Medusa, that she was once a woman in a temple, and that a god's attention fell on her like a storm. Some say she was punished for being harmed. Some say she was punished for being noticed. In these stories, the details shift, but the shape remains. A mortal is transformed, and the world calls the transformation justice. Perseus does not know which version is true. Perhaps none are fully true. Perhaps myth is less interested in truth than in echo. But he cannot escape the feeling that the cave is holding more than a monster. It is holding a warning about what happens when divine power touches mortal skin. He draws Hermes' blade. In the dim reflection, it looks like a thin crescent moon. He adjusts the angle of the shield again, until Medusa's neck sits in the center of his view. He does not look away. He does not look directly. He moves forward in small steps, guided by the mirrored image, like a sailor guided by a star reflected in water. The cave seems to listen. Somewhere beyond the chamber, deeper in the darkness, he senses other presences. The immortal sisters. He cannot see them yet, but he feels them like pressure, like air before lightning. Their sleep is not ordinary sleep. It is the sleep of things that can wake fast. Perseus keeps his movements soft. Even the rustle of his clothing seems too loud. He tells himself that the gods have stacked the board in his favor, and that his task is only to walk the thin line they have made. When he is close enough, he stops. He lifts the blade. In the stories, the cut is always swift. It happens in a single breath. Myth does not linger on the resistance of flesh or the complicated truth of endings. Myth turns violence into symbol. Perseus swings the blade in one decisive arc, guided entirely by reflection. There is a brief sound, not loud, more like a wet whisper. And then the chamber changes. Not because the cave trembles, not because flames burst from the rock, but because the air itself seems to shift, as if a cord has been plucked and is vibrating through the stone. Medusa's head is separated from her body. Perseus does not let himself look. Not once. Not for victory. Not for certainty. Not for the strange hunger of curiosity. He reaches forward with his free hand and grips the snakes carefully. They writhe, alive even now. Their bodies cool and muscular, curling around his fingers. He keeps the shield angled so he can see what he is doing without meeting the gaze. He opens the special bag, the cabeces, the one made to hold what should not be held, and he lowers the head into it as if he is placing something sacred or forbidden into a vessel. He closes the bag. He tightens the fastening. Only then does he let himself breathe. His arms tremble, not from effort alone, but from the strange disbelief that comes after doing something irreversible. He feels the weight of the bag change. It is not heavy like stone. It is heavy like consequence, heavy like a secret. And then the cave answers. A cry rises from somewhere in the darkness, harsh and ancient. It is a sound made of anger and grief woven together. The immortal sisters are awake. Their footsteps hammer through passageways. Their claws scrape rock with a sound like metal dragged across stone. Perseus hears them moving with a speed that feels impossible in such a space. He does not wait to see them. He pulls the helm down over his head, and the world shifts. He is still there, but hidden. The air does not know him. The light does not hold him. He presses himself flat against the wall, as close to the stone as he can, as if he wishes to become part of it. The cry comes again, closer now, louder. a sound that makes the statues seem to flinch in their frozen fear. In the shield's reflection, he catches a blur, then another, shapes taller and more terrible than Medusa. Their hair also living, their arms sweeping through emptiness. They search for him, but they cannot find what the helm has erased. Yet Perseus knows that invisibility is not invincibility. A careless movement, the brush of a foot against loose stone, the faint exhale of fear. Any of these could betray him. He makes his breathing small. He counts his heartbeat and tries to slow it, as if it is a fire he must keep from flaring. The sisters pass close enough that he can feel the air shift from their movement. He smells something sharp, like cold iron and old salt. He hears the hiss of snakes, the crackle of scales, and under it all, he hears something almost human, the raw ache of loss. It is strange, in that moment, to feel no triumph, only urgency, only the simple knowledge that he must leave. He slips away through the passage, guided by memory, by touch, by the soft map of the cave he has just walked. The drops of water seem louder now. The grit under his sandals seems to catch at him. The cave feels reluctant to let him go, as if it wants to keep all stories inside itself. At last he reaches the mouth of the cave. The wind meets him like a hand, cool and salt-scented. The open sky appears, gray and wide, and it feels like mercy. He steps out onto the rocky edge of the coast, and the winged sandals lift him. At first, he rises slowly, cautious, still half in the cave's spell. Then he rises faster, because distance is the only safety. The dark opening of the cave shrinks below him. The statues become pale dots and then vanish. The sea stretches out, restless but ordinary, waves breaking and reforming without memory. He holds the bag close to his body. He feels its weight against his ribs. The head inside is silent, but the silence is potent. He knows, with a cold clarity, that he is now carrying a power that does not care about intent. It will turn anything to stone. Monster, or king, or innocent passerby who looks at the wrong moment. It is not a tool that obeys kindness. The sky grows darker as he flies. Clouds slide beneath him. The wind makes a steady sound in his ears, like a low song with no words. In that sound he finds a thin thread of calm, because the wind does not judge him. The wind does not ask whether this was fair. The wind only moves, and he moves with it. Far below, somewhere in the world he cannot see, a new story begins in the wake of Medusa's end. The myths say that from her blood sprang Pegasus, the winged horse, and Chrysaor, the golden one, life leaping out of death, beauty erupting from tragedy. Myth is like that. It cannot leave an ending alone. It must plant something strange in the place where the ending happened, as if to prove that nothing in the world is simple. Perseus keeps flying, and the bag remains close, and the night grows deeper, and his thoughts become quieter, like footsteps fading down a long corridor. He does not yet know where all of this will lead. He only knows that the promise he made has been answered, and that answers, in this world, are rarely the end of anything. The night over the sea is a wide, slow thing. It does not rush. It lays itself out like dark fabric, and the stars sit on it like tiny pins of cold light. Perseus flies high enough that the waves below look like a moving field, and the foam is only a pale stitching that appears and vanishes. The wind has its own steady voice, a continuous hush in his ears, and that hush becomes almost comforting because it does not demand anything from him. It simply exists. Like breath, he keeps the bag close to his body. The cabesus presses against his ribs when the wind shifts. Now and then, he imagines he can feel movement inside it, not because the head is alive in any ordinary sense, but because the snakes are still snakes, and snakes do not stop being what they are simply because a story has asked them to. He does not open the bag. He does not check. He does not test. A power like this is safest when it stays hidden, when it remains a secret that cannot surprise the world. Below him, islands drift by. Some are no more than dark shapes with pale rims, where the sea breaks against rock. Some hold small patches of trees, and he can smell faint traces of green when he passes low enough. The scent of leaves warmed earlier in the day, now cooling in the night. Occasionally he sees a small fire on a shore, a shepherd's flame, or the amber glow of a village. The light is soft and human, and it looks fragile under the great bowl of the sky. He thinks, in those moments, about how small mortal life is, and how stubborn it is. People build fires. People cook bread. People sing low songs to children so they will sleep. They do this while gods quarrel on mountains and monsters sleep in caves. They do it because they must. Because the day will come whether they are ready or not. Perseus feels tiredness in his shoulders and in his mind. It is not the tiredness of long walking. It is the tiredness of carrying an ending. When he closes his eyes for a moment, the cave returns to him. The curved reflection of the shield, the still faces of the statues, the whisper of snakes. He opens his eyes again and keeps flying, because he has learned that stillness can be dangerous. When you stop, the weight of what you have done settles more heavily. Movement keeps the thoughts from gathering too tightly. As the night deepens, clouds drift in thin sheets across the stars. For a while he flies through mist, and the moisture beads on his skin and cools him. The world becomes muted, as if wrapped in wool. Even the sea seems quieter under the veil. It is easy, in this softness, to imagine that nothing sharp could happen. But Perseus knows better now. Softness can be a disguise. Even gentle things can hide teeth. He remembers the Graeae, the old sisters with one eye and one tooth, and the way their shared eye blinked in his hand. He remembers how knowledge can be stolen, and how even stolen knowledge feels like a debt. The world is full of debts. The gods collect them slowly. He flies on toward land. A darker line rises ahead, and then he sees it. A stretch of earth, the beginning of mountains. The air changes near stone. It becomes drier. It carries dust and the faint scent of pine. Perseus descends, careful, because he does not want to be seen. He does not want curious eyes to follow him. Even a shepherd's gaze could be dangerous if it happened to fall on the wrong thing at the wrong time. He lands in a quiet valley where the grass is short and silver with dew. The sound of his feet on the ground is small. He listens. Somewhere far away an owl calls once. then falls silent. Perseus sits on a rock and lets the night settle around him. He does not tell himself to rest. He tells himself to wait. Rest feels like a luxury in stories like these. Waiting feels more accurate. He looks up. The sky is so large that it makes his own worries feel like small stones in a pocket. Yet those small stones still press. He wonders, briefly, what Medusa's last dream was. Whether she dreamed of a temple, or of sunlight on water, or of nothing at all. He wonders if the gods ever wonder about the dreams of those they change. He does not stay long. He rises again, because the task is not finished. Polydectes still waits on Seriphos, and his promise is still a thread tied to his wrist. But the gods are rarely satisfied with simple paths. The air itself seems to lean him away from the straight line home, as if the story wants him elsewhere first, as if something is waiting. He follows that pull. Days pass in the slow rhythm of travel. Some nights are clear. Some nights are heavy with cloud. On certain evenings he sees distant lightning over the sea. Silent flashes that make the horizon look like a torn curtain. On certain mornings he flies through air that smells of rain, and the world below glistens with fresh wetness. The leaves bright, the stones dark. Each change in weather feels like a small lesson in how the world keeps moving. Indifferent to heroes, indifferent to monsters. And then, one day, he sees a shape on the horizon that looks like a wall. It is a mountain, but it rises with such suddenness that it feels like a door slammed shut. The peak is pale in the sun, and clouds gather around it like wool around a thorn. This is the place of Atlas, the Titan who holds the sky, or in some tellings, the place where he once stood, the old strength of the world made into a single figure. Perseus descends. Cautious, the ground here is rugged, with sharp stones and sparse trees that bend in the wind. The air is thinner. It tastes of cold rock. When Perseus lands, he feels the mountain's presence like a weight above him. Even though the sky is open, he walks toward a shadowed place where a figure stands. Atlas, vast and weary, his shoulders broad as cliffs, his hair like storm clouds. Perseus feels small, but he has felt small before, and he knows that smallness does not always mean weakness. Sometimes, smallness means you can slip through cracks that great things cannot notice. Atlas looks down at him, and his eyes are old, not cruel, not kind, simply old, as if he has watched too many seasons to bother with quick emotion. Perseus speaks with respect, because in this world respect is armor. He asks for shelter. He asks for food. He asks for a moment of calm. The Titan listens, and in his listening, Perseus senses something like suspicion. Some say Atlas has been warned by prophecy that a son of Zeus will steal golden apples from his garden. Some say he has grown tired of being used by divine plans. Atlas refuses him. It is not a dramatic refusal. It is a refusal like stone solid, unmoved. Perseus stands there in the wind and feels the sting of being denied when he is already carrying too much. For a moment he considers turning away. He could leave. He could fly. The world is wide. But the story leans in again. It reminds him of power. It reminds him of the thing in his bag. The silent head that can end arguments without words. Perseus does not want to use it. Even thinking of using it makes his stomach tighten. Yet he feels the familiar pressure of necessity. In these myths, necessity is a force that keeps appearing. Like the tide, he warns Atlas. Softly, he says he carries something that is dangerous to look upon. He says he does not wish harm. He only wishes passage. Atlas, proud and tired and ancient, does not move. The wind moves around them. A bird circles once overhead and disappears. Perseus takes a slow breath. He turns his face away, as he has learned to do. He opens the bag only the smallest amount, just enough. He does not look directly. He uses the edge of the shield's reflection even now. Careful, careful, because he understands that the power inside the bag does not choose its targets. Then he tilts the opening toward Atlas. The Titan's eyes meet what no eyes should meet. The change is swift. It is not accompanied by thunder. There is no great scream. There is only a sudden stillness, as if the world has held its breath. Atlas becomes stone. The lines of his face freeze. The wind that moved through his hair now moves over rock. His vast body becomes the mountain itself, and the mountain stands where he stood, as if it has always been there. Perseus closes the bag at once. He steps back, and his heart beats heavy, not with triumph, but with the same quiet sorrow he felt in the cave. He has used a power that should not exist in mortal hands, and yet it exists, because the gods allowed it, because the gods wanted a path cleared. He looks up at the mountain. The clouds gather around its peak. The sky seems to rest on it. He thinks, briefly, that Atlas was punished long ago for fighting against Zeus. Now he is punished again for refusing a traveler. It is difficult to know where justice ends and convenience begins. Perseus leaves. He flies away with the wind behind him, and the mountain remains, silent, holding up the sky as if it is doing a job it never asked for. As he travels farther, the land changes. The air becomes warmer. The scent of salt returns. The coast below is pale and long, and the sea is a deep blue that looks almost gentle from above. He sees fishermen in small boats, their oars making slow, even strokes. He sees smoke rising from villages, thin threads that climb into the air and vanish. He sees herds moving like dark dots across fields. And then, one evening, he notices something strange along a stretch of coast. The shore is crowded, not with joy, but with people standing in stillness. Their bodies are turned toward the sea as if they are watching a wound. The light is low. The sky is streaked with red. The sea itself looks tense, the waves drawn back as if they are preparing to surge. Perseus descends to a high rock and watches from above. Hidden by shadow, he hears voices, not loud, but thick with fear. He hears the sound of weeping. He hears prayers spoken in hurried murmurs. Like birds fluttering in a cage, he listens for names, and he catches them. Cassiopeia, Cepheus, the king and queen of this land. A boast spoken too brightly, too carelessly, about beauty. A boast that offended the sea nymphs. And through them, Poseidon. The gods are like that. They do not need wars to punish. Sometimes they punish through vanity, through a sentence spoken at a feast. through a pride that felt harmless. Poseidon sends a sea monster, they say, a creature that rises from the water like a moving cliff. It destroys boats. It smashes harbor walls. It drags men into foam. It makes the sea itself feel hostile. The priests come with their smoke and their rituals, and the answer they bring is always the answer that makes mortals feel small a sacrifice. A maiden, a princess, Andromeda. Perseus watches the people part like a slow river, and he sees her at last. She is chained to a rock that juts out toward the sea. The chains are dark, and they look cold. The rock is slick with spray. Andromeda stands very still, as if moving would waste what little calm she has saved for herself. Her hair is lifted now and then by the wind. Her face, in the fading light, looks pale, but not empty. It looks like someone who has already spent all the fear she can afford, and is now waiting with a quiet dignity that makes the watching crowd seem even more desperate. The sea breathes. The waves slide in, slide out. The wind carries the taste of salt and the faint smell of seaweed. The sun lowers. The world becomes darker. And in the dark, the imagination makes everything larger. Perseus feels the familiar pull of a story tightening around him. He did not come here to find a chained girl. He did not come here to enter another kingdom's trouble. And yet he is here. And the gods have a way of placing a person exactly where a new knot must be tied. He watches the horizon. The water far out looks like it is moving in a different pattern, as if something underneath it is shifting. The crowd seems to sense it too, because their voices falter. A silence spreads, not peaceful, but stunned. Then a shape rises. At first, it is only a dark curve, like a hill emerging from the sea. Then it lifts higher. Water pours from it. The creature's back glistens. Its movement is slow and heavy, deliberate, like a large thought becoming real. The waves around it change direction. The sea is no longer ordinary sea. It is the body of something that belongs to an older world. A world where monsters were not rare, but expected. Andromeda stands with her chains. The rock beneath her is wet. The wind pushes her hair across her face. She does not scream. Her mouth opens as if she is breathing a prayer or a farewell. Perseus's hand tightens around the strap of his bag. He could leave. He could fly away and never see this again. He could tell himself that this is not his story. But he feels something in his chest that is not only fear. It is that quiet human refusal to accept that the world must always be cruel just because it can be. It is the memory of his mother trapped under a king's desire. It is the knowledge that sacrifices are often demanded from the ones who least deserve to pay. He remains in the shadows, watching, breathing slowly, and in the steady rhythm of his breath, he begins to make a decision. Not a loud decision, not a heroic shout, a simple decision, formed the way a stone forms in water. Slowly, inevitably, once the right conditions exist. The sea monster comes closer. The crowd trembles. The chains glint faintly in the dying light. Perseus shifts his weight, preparing to move. And the story, patient as the tide, draws him toward its next turning. The sea does not hurry, even when it carries a monster beneath its skin. It keeps its rhythm, rolling in and drawing back, rolling in and drawing back, as if the world has all the time it needs. From his high rock, Perseus watches the dark swell far out, and he feels the same quiet certainty he felt in the cave. Something is coming, and it will not be reasoned with. Andromeda is still chained to the sea-worn stone. The iron links are wet with spray, and every breath of wind leaves a fine salt on the metal. Each time a wave strikes the rock, the sound is like a heavy sigh, and the droplets that rise into the air catch the last light of day, then vanish into dusk. The people gathered on the shore stand close together, yet they look alone. Fear has a way of turning every face inward. Even when hands touch shoulders, the mind retreats to its own small room. Perseus watches her as carefully as he watches the horizon. She is taller than he expected, slender but not fragile. Her posture straight, as if she has chosen dignity because it is the one thing still hers. Her hair moves in the wind like a dark ribbon. Her eyes, when she turns her head slightly, are fixed on the water, not wide with panic, but narrowed in concentration, as if she is trying to meet fate with attention rather than terror. He wonders what she can hear. From where she stands, the hiss of foam, the cry of seabirds, the low murmur of strangers praying behind her, and beneath all that, the steady pulse of the tide. The sun sinks and the air cools. The surface of the water turns from bright blue to dark glass, and with the dark comes movement. At first it is only a line far out, almost too subtle to notice. The sea seems to bulge, as if something immense rolls beneath it, lifting it from below. Then the line becomes a ridge, and the ridge becomes a shape, and Perseus feels the fine hairs along his arms lift. The creature is not simply a beast. It is a sentence the sea has been holding, and now it is being read aloud. The crowd makes a sound that is not quite a scream. It is a breath taken in all at once, the way a room inhales when a door opens to something unwelcome. The sea splits around a dark back, water pouring off it in sheets. In the fading light, it looks like the spine of a hill that has learned to move. Then a head emerges, and Perseus understands why people call it a monster. It is not merely large. It is wrong in a way that makes the mind recoil. Its mouth is built for breaking, not for eating, and its eyes are pale and fixed, as if they have never learned mercy. Perseus could leave. The winged sandals would lift him easily. He could turn his face toward the open sky and let this shore become a small, distant line behind him. No god has commanded him to intervene here. No oath binds him to this kingdom. Yet when he considers leaving, he feels his mother's presence in his mind, Danae's quiet endurance, and he feels the old anger he carried on Seriphos when he watched Polydectes circle her like a shadow. He sees how similar the patterns are, how often the helpless are offered up to satisfy an anger that began somewhere else. He does not shout. He does not announce himself. He simply moves. He steps off the rock and lets the winged sandals lift him. The air catches him at once, cool and steady, carrying the scent of seaweed and distant smoke from the shore fires. He rises above the water, and the monster turns its head, sensing movement, perhaps hearing the whisper of wings. The sea around it seethes as it pushes forward, each wave like a hand shoving it toward the helpless figure on the rock. Perseus circles once, not to show off, but to measure. He notes the chain, the rock, the distance to the shore, the line of the crowd. He watches the angle of the waves and the way the creature's mass displaces the water. He thinks of Athena's counsel, of seeing with the mind before moving with the body. Then he descends. The monster lunges, mouth opening, and the sound it makes is low and thick, like a boulder grinding against another boulder underwater. Perseus feels the spray strike his face. He smells the creature, a sharp odor of brine and old blood. He swings his blade, Hermes' bright gift, and the edge cuts into the wet hide. The monster recoils, and the water around it blooms dark for a moment. Not dramatic, not theatrical, but simply real, as if the sea itself has been bruised. The crowd on the shore stirs. Some lift their hands to their mouths. Some fall to their knees. Some whisper prayers to gods who have not answered them until now. Andromeda watches with the still focus of someone who does not dare believe yet. Perseus strikes again. He flies low, skimming the surface, letting the sandals keep him just out of reach. The monster snaps at him, jaws closing on air. Its tail whips, sending a wave toward the rock, and Andromeda braces as water slams into her legs. The chains hold, the rock holds, she holds. Perseus feels the muscle of his arms tighten, the ache of exertion spreading through him. He is no longer in the clean realm of plans and divine gifts. He is in the rough realm of flesh meeting flesh, where even heroes can tire. For a moment, he tastes fear again. Not the cave's quiet fear, but the simple fear of drowning, of being pulled under and crushed beneath the weight of a living cliff. And then he remembers the bag at his side, the cabeces, the hidden head, the quiet, absolute ending. He does not want to use it, because he knows what it means. He knows that a gaze like that does not discriminate between guilty and innocent. He knows that a power that turns living things into stone is a kind of sickness in the world, even if it can be used as medicine in a single desperate moment. Yet the monster surges again, and Perseus feels the narrowing of time. He feels the story tightening its knot. He chooses. He turns his face away and opens the bag only enough. He does not look. He uses the shield's reflection, as he did in the cave. Careful and practiced now, the snakes writhe at the opening, and the air seems to cool, as if the world itself senses what is near. He angles the opening toward the beast. The monster's eyes meet Medusa's gaze. The change spreads across it like frost. The wet hide dulls. The movement stutters, then stops. The ridges along its back harden. The mouth freezes open in the shape of a hunger interrupted. Within a breath, the sea creature is no longer sea creature. It is a stone monument, half submerged, a jagged reef where waves will break for years to come. The water keeps moving, but the thing inside the water has become still forever. Perseus closes the bag at once. He feels his stomach twist with the familiar sorrow. Another life ended. Another power used. Yet when he looks toward the rock, he sees Andromeda still standing, alive. The wind lifting her hair, the water sliding away from her ankles. Life preserved. That is what matters now. He flies to her and lands on the rock with care. because the surface is slick and the chains are close. He speaks softly, not with grand declarations, but with practical calm. He tells her to stay still. He takes the blade and works the iron fastenings, sawing through what he can, prying what he cannot. The metal is cold under his fingers. His hands slip once in the wetness, and he steadies himself, breathing slowly, steadying his mind as he steadies his body. At last the chain gives. Andromeda sways, not from weakness alone, but from the sudden absence of weight she had been forced to carry. Perseus catches her by the elbow, firm but gentle. He guides her to the edge of the rock where the waves are quieter, and then he lifts her into the air as easily as he can, the winged sandals taking both their weights with a soft pull. She clings to him only lightly, as if she is afraid to claim too much safety too quickly. They rise above the water. The shore widens beneath them. The crowd becomes a living field of faces turned upward. When Perseus sets Andromeda down on the sand, the people surge forward, then stop, as if unsure whether they are allowed to touch what has been returned. Her parents come first, Cepheus and Cassiopeia, their robes damp from standing near the surf, their faces strained with sleepless fear. Cassiopeia reaches out and then pauses, as if afraid Andromeda will vanish like a mirage. Then she pulls her daughter close, and the sound of her sob is raw and human, the sound of a life returned at the last possible moment. Perseus stands a little apart. He lets the reunion happen without him in the center. He watches the way Andromeda's shoulders soften when she is held. He watches the way her gaze, which had been fixed on the sea, begins to move again, taking in ordinary things, the line of the shore, the smoke from a cooking fire, the familiar faces of servants and friends. Ordinary things become precious when a life has been balanced on the edge of ending. When the king turns to Perseus, the gratitude in his voice is heavy. He speaks of offerings, of gold, of a marriage vow promised to Andromeda before this crisis, and how that promise can be changed, undone, rewritten in honor of the one who saved her. Perseus listens, and in his listening, he feels the tiredness deepen. He is still carrying the bag. He is still carrying Medusa's gaze. He is still a man with a task not yet finished. A man whose mother waits on an island under a king's hand. Yet he looks at Andromeda and sees something steady in her, not merely beauty, though poets will say that first. He sees endurance. He sees the quiet courage of someone who stood on a rock and did not collapse into screaming. He sees the strength of a mortal who has faced the sea and remained herself. He agrees, not as a conquest, but as a joining. Like two paths meeting at a crossroads and choosing to continue side by side. The celebration that follows is gentler than war feasts, but it is still bright. Torches are lit as night comes on. The smell of roasting meat drifts through the air. Wine is poured. People speak in low, grateful tones, as if they are afraid to wake the sea again. Perseus sits beside Andromeda in the hall. The stone walls hold the warmth of torches. The floor is swept clean. The air smells of herbs and smoke and sweet fruit. Andromeda's hands rest in her lap, and Perseus notices faint marks on her wrists where the chains rubbed. He thinks of his own cuts from travel, the bruises that will bloom later, and he understands. with a quiet heaviness, that survival always leaves a mark. A man enters with anger in his posture, claiming Andromeda has promised, accusing Perseus of theft. The hall stiffens, the torches crackle, the music falters. Perseus feels the story tighten again, because Greek myth rarely allows a blessing without a shadow. He does not want another battle. He does not want more blood spilled on a night meant for healing. Yet the man's followers raise weapons, and the king's guards tense. And Andromeda's eyes flick toward Perseus with a question she does not speak. Will this safety hold? Perseus keeps his voice calm. He asks the hall to step back. He asks Andromeda to close her eyes, gently, not in fear, but in trust. He turns his face away and reaches for the bag. There is a hush, the kind that falls when a decision has been made and cannot be undone. He opens the bag and holds the head just high enough that the challengers can see. The snakes move like living cords. The gaze does its work. The angry man freezes mid-step. His followers stiffen. Their weapons stop in the air. Their faces become stone faces. Their mouths locked in half-formed shouts, one by one. The threat becomes a garden of statues, pale in torchlight, silent as columns. Perseus closes the bag again, quickly, as if ashamed to let the power breathe too long. The hall is silent. Andromeda opens her eyes and sees the stillness and understands. No one celebrates this victory. It is too cold. It is too final. Yet, it ends the danger, and the night can continue in a softer way. The lyres begin again, hesitant at first, then steady. People speak more quietly than before, as if they have learned a new respect for what a hero carries. Later, when the torches burn low and the feast dissolves into murmurs, Perseus walks with Andromeda along a corridor that opens to a courtyard. The sky above is deep and sprinkled with stars. A fountain murmurs. The air is cool and smells of stone and night-blooming flowers. Andromeda does not ask him to explain everything. She simply walks beside him. And in that quiet companionship, Perseus feels, for the first time since Seriphos, a small easing in his chest, as if the world has offered him a thin strand of peace. Yet the strand is not enough to hold him here forever. In the distance of his mind, he still sees his mother's face, and the island that waits. So the story turns again, gently, toward home today. The journey back to Seriphos begins the way many journeys in myth begin, with a small decision made in a quiet moment, and then a long stretch of wind and distance that feels both ordinary and enchanted. Perseus does not leave immediately after the wedding feast. He stays long enough for Andromeda to sleep a full night in a bed, free of chains, with a roof above her and the steady comfort of familiar walls. He stays long enough to see that her parents have stopped flinching every time the sea breathes a little louder than usual. He stays long enough for the city to return to its small routines, for market stalls to open again, for water to be carried, for lamps to be lit at dusk. Then, at last, he and Andromeda step out into the morning air. The horizon is pale. The sea looks calm, as if it is trying to pretend it never carried a monster at all. A few fishermen move along the shore, casting nets with the patient motions of people who have learned that the world continues whether or not the gods are pleased. Smoke rises from cooking fires. Somewhere, a child laughs. and the sound is small and precious. Perseus adjusts the strap of the kibisis at his side. Even in daylight, he feels its weight like a shadow. The head inside does not sleep. It does not soften. It is a power that remains sharp. And he knows he must set it down, must place it where it belongs, before it hardens his own heart. Andromeda does not ask to see it. She has seen enough. She watches Perseus's hands instead. The way he checks each knot, the way he moves with care, as if the air itself could be cut. She walks beside him and keeps her voice low when she speaks. She says she is ready. She says she trusts him. They lift into the sky on the winged sandals, the morning breeze rising to meet them. Below, the coastline becomes a ribbon of sand. The olive groves become dark patches on pale earth. The roads become thin lines that lead to towns like clusters of stones. From above, everything looks gentler. Even the cliffs, even the sea, the world, seen from a height, can trick the mind into believing it is calm. As they fly, Perseus thinks of other heights, other edges. He thinks of the cliff where he first saw Medusa's cave, mouth like a wound in the rock. He thinks of the marshes where old stories place Echidna, half woman and half serpent, hidden in the damp dark, waiting. He thinks of Typhon, the vast storm body of rebellion, a creature said to be so large that mountains trembled when it breathed. He has not met them. He may never meet them. Yet he feels their presence in the background of Greek life, like distant thunder that never fully goes away. The gods, the poets say, defeated Typhon and buried him. But the land still shakes sometimes, and the sea still groans, and people still wake in the night, feeling the bed tremble under them. A myth is not only a story, it is also an explanation whispered into fear. And from Typhon and Echidna, in the old telling, came a whole family of terrors. Cerberus, the dog with many heads, guarding the quiet gate of the underworld. The Hydra, whose necks multiply when cut, a lesson that some problems grow the more you fight them. The Chimera, with lion's mouth, goat's body, serpent's tail, stitched together like a nightmare that cannot decide what shape it wants. These creatures are not simply enemies for heroes to slay. They are shapes given to human dread, made visible so that dread can be named. Perseus does not tell Andromeda all these thoughts. He carries them in silence, letting the wind wash through him. Andromeda watches the sea beneath, the islands scattered like stepping stones. Sometimes she closes her eyes briefly, not to sleep, but to rest her mind, as if she is learning a new kind of peace. When at last Seriphos appears, it is smaller than Perseus remembers. It sits in the sea like a plain stone, modest, unimportant, and yet full of consequences. From the air he sees the harbor, the boats, the narrow streets, the low houses. He sees, near the center, the larger buildings where Polydectes held court, where laughter could turn sharp, where kindness could be used like a rope. Perseus's chest tightens, not with fear now, but with a slow anger that is cooled into clarity. He descends carefully. He does not land in secret. He does not slip through shadows. He walks through the town with Andromeda beside him, and people turn to look, because he is unfamiliar and yet somehow feels like a story that has come to life. He goes first to the place where his mother is kept. Danae's room smells of stale air and clean linen. Light falls through a narrow window. When Perseus steps inside, she turns, and for a moment, her face holds the guarded expression of someone who has learned not to hope too quickly. Then she sees her son, and the guard drops. Relief moves through her like water through dry ground. She reaches for him, and Perseus takes her hands, warm and real, and he breathes as if he has been holding his breath for months. He tells her, quietly, that she is safe. He tells her he has come back. He does not speak of monsters right away. He does not speak of severed heads. He lets the simple truth settle first. The chase is over. For this moment. Polydectes calls for him soon after. Or perhaps Perseus goes to him, because some knots must be untied by hand. The hall is as Perseus remembers polished stone. Men lounging like bored dogs. Laughter that is too quick. Wine that stains lips red. Polydectes sits high, and when he sees Perseus, he smiles as if nothing has changed, as if no threats were ever spoken, as if Danae was never cornered. That smile is a kind of insult. It says that a mortal king believes he can rewrite what he has done. Polydectes asks for the Gorgon's head, almost playfully, as if he expects a joke, as if he expects Perseus to admit failure. Perseus feels the quiet cold in his stomach. He thinks of the cave. He thinks of Andromeda's wrists. He thinks of Danae's long patience. He understands, with a tired steadiness, that cruelty often survives because it is not challenged at the right time. He tells his mother to turn away. He tells Andromeda to turn away. He tells the decent men in the hall to close their eyes. Some obey, uncertain, embarrassed, as if they are being asked to participate in a ritual they do not understand. Then Perseus turns his face aside and opens the bag. There is no grand speech. There is only the moment when the head is lifted, when the snakes shift, when the air itself seems to draw back. Polydectes looks. His smile breaks. The men around him look. Their laughter becomes silence in their throats. And then the hall becomes still. The king hardens in his chair, eyes wide, mouth caught between words. The men beside him freeze mid-gesture, cups in hand, fingers half-curled. The statues that remain are not noble. They are ordinary, mean, ridiculous. Stone preserves the truth without mercy. Perseus closes the bag, and the sound of the clasp is small, final. He does not stare at what he has done. He does not savor it. He simply breathes once, slow and deep, and lets the fear drain away. In the days that follow, the island changes in the quiet way islands do. A new ruler is chosen, a kinder one, or at least one less predatory. Danae walks in the sunlight again. People greet her without whispering. Perseus visits the shore and watches the fishing boats move like slow insects over the water. He tastes salt on the air and realizes that the sea can feel peaceful again, even when you know what it can hide. Yet myth does not allow a hero to remain in a single calm place for long. There is always another thread, another promise, another consequence. Perseus knows he cannot keep Medusa's head forever. It is too dangerous. It is too heavy. And so, in time, he seeks out Athena, the goddess who helped him see without dying. He travels, and the landscape changes: dry hills with scrub, valleys with vineyards, small shrines where smoke rises in thin lines. He hears distant stories as he goes, stories of other heroes and other monsters, as if the world is always telling itself the same lesson in different voices. He hears of Heracles wrestling the Hydra in a swamp where the air smells of rot and reeds. He hears of Bellerophon trying to master Pegasus and facing the Chimera, fire hot enough to crack stone. He hears of Theseus entering the labyrinth under Crete, where the walls twist like thoughts, and the Minotaur waits, a creature born from shame and secrecy. He hears of Odysseus steering between Scylla and Charybdis, one side a many-mouthed hunger, the other a whirlpool that swallows whole ships. And he understands how often choices are made under pressure, with no clean answer. Even the sirens, those singers on the rocks, are not only a threat, they are a picture of how the mind can be lured by sweetness when it is tired. A song can promise rest and instead bring ruin. A voice can sound like home and still be a cliff. Perseus carries these stories like smooth stones in his pocket, not to weigh himself down, but to remember what kind of world he lives in. A world where gods are bright and unpredictable, where monsters are the shape of fear, where heroes are simply people who keep moving even when their knees shake. When he meets Athena at last, it is not like meeting a mortal queen. It is like stepping into a clear air that sharpens every thought. Her presence is cool, not unkind, but exact. She does not ask for flattery. She asks for truth. Perseus offers the head, still hidden, still dangerous. Athena accepts it with the calm of someone taking back a tool that was loaned. Later, poets will say she set it on her shield, the aegis, a warning carried into battle. Perseus is relieved to be rid of it. He feels as if he has set down a heavy stone he did not realize he was carrying in his chest. His story does not end there, because stories rarely end cleanly. There is an old prophecy about his grandfather, and fate has a quiet way of waiting. In one telling, Perseus tries to avoid it, keeping away, choosing distance, choosing caution. In another telling, the world itself arranges the meeting, a festival, a gathering, a discus thrown in sport, a wind that changes at the wrong moment. The discus flies, and an old man falls. Only afterward does Perseus learn the name, and the prophecy closes like a door that was always meant to shut. It is not cruelty that makes this happen. It is not even choice. Not fully. It is the strange logic of myth that fleeing a fate can be one of the paths that leads to it. The Greeks spoke of this without shouting. They spoke of it the way one speaks of winter. It comes. You prepare as you can. You do not insult it by pretending it is not real. And still, within this world, people live. They plant. They bake bread. They sweep their thresholds. They tell stories in the warmth of firelight. They look up at the mountains, at Olympus, hidden in cloud, and they do not expect fairness from the gods. They hope for balance, for small mercies, for a day of calm sea and a night of safe sleep. Perhaps that is the gentlest lesson beneath all these harsh tales. The monsters are loud in the telling, but most life is quiet. Most life is a hand on a child's hair, a cup of water offered to a traveler, a lamp lit at dusk and left burning until morning. Even heroes, after the battles and the marvels, sit down. They eat. They listen to the wind. They feel tiredness in their bones. So let Perseus, in your mind, become smaller now. Not less important, but more human. Let him walk away from the stone hall, away from the shore where the sea once lifted its monster, away from the cave where snakes whispered in the dark. Let him become a figure on a road at sunset, carrying nothing sharper than memory. In some tellings, the gods place these lives into the sky, not as reward, but as remembrance. Perseus becomes a constellation with his blade lifted, not in fury, but in a single held moment of resolve. Andromeda is set nearby, her chain transformed into a thin line of faint stars, gentler echo of what she survived. Cassiopeia sits in her proud chair, tilted and turning through the seasons, as if the heavens cannot decide whether to honor her or quietly correct her. Cepheus watches over them, quiet and steady. When you trace those patterns, you are looking at a myth made into quiet light. And if you look up on a clear night, let those small lights remind you that fear can pass gently. The sky above him deepens to indigo. Stars appear one by one, patient, unhurried, somewhere far off. Waves break on a beach and draw back again, rolling in and drawing back, rolling in and drawing back. The old rhythm that held both terror and peace. And as the world settles into that steady rhythm, you can let your thoughts soften. The way the sea softens the edges of stone, you can let the day loosen its grip, one quiet breath at a time. Good night.